Professor Brain Brown's research shows that vulnerability fosters good emotional and mental health. It is a sign of courage. We become more resilient and brave when we embrace who we truly are and what we are feeling. The Vulnerable Scientist podcast is a space for scientists to tell their honest and authentic stories. I am your host, Sarah Nyakeri, who happens to be a scientist, informal science communicator, and I help scientists create personal websites. If you want to support this show, go to www.patreon.com/thevulnerable-scientist. You can also follow this podcast on all social media platforms at TV Scientist Pod. What are the hobbies that you have, or what are those things that you do that have nothing to do with your PhD or your podcasting?
Cooking.
Things that, sorry?
Cooking.
I
love to cook. Love to cook. I cook
Which food do you?
Oh my goodness. You name it, I could. I recently was cooking this week. I was learning how to cook jollof rice. I got it from the recipe from a Ghanaian friend of mine because I'd been wanting it and I'd been craving it, and he sent me a recipe and I think I nailed it. So I love cooking for my people, for my friends. Oh, it's a form of love language for me, and it's a way how I de-stress. I love looking up recipes, trying it. I love going out to eat and like trying new things and trying to figure out like what is in this food, or trying to be like, how can I replicate this at home? Like cooking, I love to cook. Like I can spend 12 hours in the kitchen just cooking. And you can leave me alone and I can create basically almost anything, as long as I can follow and you give me the ingredients. I love it so much.
What's your favorite food?
I don't have one. It's like picking a favorite child. I can't. I love food so much, and food for me has just got different moods, it's got different feelings. I don't know. I cannot answer that. Like I love food too much to just pick one. I love various different things. I love rice. I love pasta. I love rice. I don't know, man. I love salads. I love veggies. It's too hard. That's terrible. I love seafood. So like no, it's hard. I cannot answer that. It's like picking a favorite child. I cannot.
What is the experience like moving from Malawi, as much as you were young, moving from, like, of course you go back and forth, but what is it? How different is it, Malawi and South Africa?
I mean, it's very different, you know, just in terms of the things that I take for granted sort of here, you know, it's a little bit more difficult. My dad also always sometimes says to me that, like, you know, your life could have been very different. So for example, the kids who I used to play with, when I was younger, when I was 6, the girls, for example, some of them. So this is in Kodagota, which is where we lived. This is Lake Shoreside by Lake Malawi. Before we moved to Lilongwe and then we came here to South Africa. So when I go back there, that's where my grandmother is. The girls my age have like 2-3 kids, married. Some of them didn't really complete school. There's just, you know, so there was a time when my dad was just like to me, this just shows how life can be so humbling. Like for me, I'm not married. I don't have kids. Trying to pursue a PhD, you know, before the age of 30. I'm trying to do all of these things. And it just goes to show how different my life would have been. You know, so I take note of the privilege of how I'm really grateful of the life that I have currently, because if I was still where I was, we wouldn't be having this conversation, definitely, you know? Yeah. So there's that aspect which I always take into when I go home, that my life could have been different, you know? And also, I mean, Malawi, Malawi and South Africa, going to Malawi is like a holiday. We go there for like a month, visiting the various parts of my various different families for either a week or a couple of days, and then we move all across visiting both my mom's side and my dad's side. And uh, it's different things they are when we are in Lilongwe, which is the capital. You know, there it's almost like being in South Africa where you have, like the TVs and stuff. Like when I was younger, I used to be like, oh, the DSTV and all of that stuff. Then when we go to the village, it's like I have to walk 10 k's to go and get water. So there's a huge contrast. So it's and also at the same time, I recognize that I do it in a very fly by night way, where because it's for a month, and even when I say a month, it's not like I'm staying in one place for a month. I'm moving around, so it's almost like just being a tourist and a visitor and all of that stuff. So I don't get to sort of experience living in Malawi, if that makes sense. I'm sort of just like passing through and in a very tourist way. And I also recognize how it's difficult and the people who are doing great things and there are people who are doing really amazing things there as well. So yeah, it's very very different, and I always like it always just makes me my I always get sometimes reminded of this um where my dad always says that like when I first came to South Africa I could not speak a word of English. Like no ways. I mean I could like very broken, but now the way that you hear me, because like one of the first things that people always compliment me is how I speak, my articulation of English, and you know, so my dad always goes like, ah, "Don't be impressed. This one, she couldn't speak English. Her English, if you saw her English, it wasn't all that good as it is right now. So it's just some of those things where you compare and contrast of just the Anne who came when she was 6, 7 years old to the Anne who is now, who is, this woman who you hear, who speaks confidently, who, just, yeah, there's a lot of, it's a complete change.
Food wise, how different is it? Or how the same is it?
To be honest with you, we eat the same. My parents are not bougie, if I can say that. Like we eat if we like they my mom, like I say, she's got the garden, so she grows the same type of veggies. Um, there's a place where is the Malawian market, so we eat the food that is being eaten in Malawi. My mom has always incorporated it here in South Africa, so I don't get like a culture shock like when I go back home because we eat the same way that we'd have eaten. Granted, with your maybe a little bit more fancier when I make like some fancy things, but the same foods, like
For example,
not in my mother's house. The same things you will find them. The different types of maize meal. Your cassava. She'll have her I don't know, pumpkin leaves, like the fish, the dried fish, the tiny fish. Like no, it wasn't different. It wasn't for me, and growing up it was never different because my parents really still wanted to have that. I think for them it was always just having that part of themselves and even speaking the language as well. They always, it was always part of it. So yeah, so I'm really fortunate too that my parents never let that go, and that's why they also very of the opinion of us going to Malawi as often as possible.
Are there other hobbies?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. Sleeping.
Yeah, that's a hobby.
Netflixing. Reading. I love to read as well.
Which book would you recommend?
Oh, which book would I recommend? I recently finished reading James Clear's Atomic Habits. I loved that. I loved that. It was very good. And also Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. I loved that. And he also has another one called Outwitting the Devil. So I love books that sort of make me think a little bit. In that way, almost practical. And just how they are very applicable. Like Napoleon Hill's books are years old, but they're still applicable in this day and age. Yeah. Those are the types of books off the top of my head that I can definitely recommend.
Okay. All right. In the future, what are you planning to do career-wise?
It's a very audacious dream. I really want to pursue this avenue of being a science communicator in its entirety, in the sense that I haven't figured it out exactly. So, of course, I have a dream for the podcast in the sense of, being on television and having a team where a premier platform for Africans in STEM, you think root of the science and have a whole team who does everything. And I interview these various amazing African scientists globally. That's the dream with the podcast. The dream for me as Dr. Anne, because that's who I'm going to be. I really want to pursue, like I said, the science communication in its entirety. Being a science, like a consultant, communication wise. Like I said, I haven't figured it out exactly, but I just feel like there's just so many, there's just so many amazing things that are being done by institutions, by researchers, by people who are doing research, and it's not being, I don't want to say not communicated properly, but it's not as effective as it needs to be. And we saw those holes during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I want to be one of those people who can be able to communicate, who can be able to effectively communicate that. So be it in written form or spoken form. So I'm currently trying to really hone my skills in my science communication, not only because I think I've figured out, I think I've really honed my skills in the speaking aspect of it. So I want to hone my skills in the other aspects of it, so that I can
all round.
I can be sort of like a Swiss knife and be able to do it well in consultancy, because I've seen it being done, abroad in Europe, and it's being done really well. Like science journalism is phenomenal, and it's people who are like, physicists, or who are engineers, or who are crop scientists, just because they have that understanding of science. They're able to understand how to communicate it effectively. So yeah, I want to be one of the leading science communication consultants in Africa. That's the dream. I don't know how. And one of the dreams is to work, with the UN somehow, some way, as well. So I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. I haven't figured it out, but that's my future thing. So that's why I'm saying that, like, and I think that's where it goes back to being like knowledge transfer being the core of who I am. I want to be able to transfer knowledge effectively. And that's why I said to you that being a lecturer for me feels like I'll be boxing myself in, because I want to do it in a different way, because it still involves what I love to do, people and science. I don't know how. Knowledge transfer. That's what I want to do.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. You said Swiss need. I don't know if I had that right.
I said Swiss knife.
Swiss knife.
Yeah.
Swiss knife.
Swiss knife. Yeah.
What's that?
No. I meant, like, a Swiss knife. It's got it's like that pocket knife that's got various different tools. It's not just one knife. It can do various different things. So I was saying I wanted to be like a Swiss knife in terms of like science communication, where I can do various different. That's why I said consultancy. and even just agricultural consultancy as well. Because I'm not going to study all this amount.
Yeah.
And not use my degree.
Yeah.
Because I've realized that as well, that the things that I think everybody knows in terms of farming and agriculture, it's not that common.
Yeah.
So again, knowledge transfer. Where I was actually helping a cousin of mine, do something on a plot of farm, and it was so beautiful. And I realized, oh my goodness, I can consult and I can do this. So I have another project with another friend of mine who also wants help in terms of how to effectively farm their land. So that's also another thing that I also want to do. Consultancy. See, like consult. I don't necessarily, and then maybe later on in life have my own farm. But yeah, consult. consult.
Okay, great. We are coming to the end of this podcast, and I was wondering, is there any question that you would have loved to be asked so that you can answer? Or is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we've not talked about on this podcast?
I think everything is really good. I felt like I've been speaking. But no, I think you've asked me, yeah, you've done the thing in asking me.
Okay, so all right. So there's nothing else to add?
No, I just think, I think I've said a lot. Like I said, if anybody can hear anything from me,
yeah,
mental health support, which is one thing, networking. Like from then on, networking, just putting yourself out there. Those are my key takeaways, just in terms of things that I've learned so far.
How do you feel after having this conversation?
I feel really good, but also at the same time, like I realized sometimes I'm just speaking a lot. That's why when I realized with that whole book thing, I was like, never mind. I mean, as much as I am very open, I realized I was like, oh my gosh, this is going on the internet forever. So there's some moments where I felt like I've never spoken about something so publicly. But I also realized that I needed to speak about it in the sense that to help somebody else. But so it was really, you made it really easy to talk, and that's what I really appreciate.